September has been an interesting month so far. This is only my second time sitting down to film since the month started. Videos that came out earlier in the month had all been recorded in August. School has started, I'm teaching a bunch of music lessons, so my schedule is pretty full. Then we had family time and a wedding, and then my whole family got sick. So, while I have had time to read, I haven't had much time to just come up here and turn the camera on and talk about books. But I am ready to talk about what I read in September and then what I plan on reading in October. So here we go. The first thing I read this month was Darkblade Assassin by Andy Pellequin. This was at the top of my TBR for the month, and I have not actually made a video dedicated to this book yet. I plan on doing that sometime in the next week or two. It will not be a full review because I only read the first about 200 pages. This is one that got sent to me, and in the email asking if I'd like to read a book by this author, I was given a few choices of what sounded the most interesting, and all of the options were dark fantasy, because this is a dark fantasy author. And when I started this book, I actually liked it more than I expected. I thought the first chapter especially was very well done, especially setting up the idea and the story, which is the Hunter of Voromis, and like how cool and competent he is, and setting up the storytelling style and the amount of adult type of content you're going to get. So I will go more into depth in this one in a video dedicated to it, but for now, it's not a bad book. It just, after 200 pages, it was enough for me. And I felt done reading it. Just a lot of dark fantasy style, and it just didn't stop, it just kept going. So after 200 pages, I decided I was done and I wanted something a little more lighthearted. A little ironic, because the next thing I read was The Call of the Wild by Jack London. And if you've read this, you know why I laughed. I was expecting a children's book. I was expecting something along the lines of The Incredible Journey. It's a domesticated dog who gets kidnapped and sold and goes to be a sled dog during the gold rush up in the Yukon, Western Canada into Alaska area. And while I thought I was getting a children's book and it would be lighthearted and fun and a break from the dark fantasy that I was reading, this had a lot of the same type of content as far as violence, and I was surprised. I'm thankful that I didn't just pick this up thinking it's a children's book and hand it to my son, who is 8 and probably not ready for this kind of book. It was not what I expected, and it was not the break I expected from the dark fantasy that I thought I was getting. So after reading this, I went and watched the Disney version movie, which is a lot more lighthearted, childlike, and what I thought I was getting when I read this. So I don't know if I'm actually going to keep this book or not, or if it will make it into my next book unhaul the next time I go cleaning up my shelves. We shall see. This one has The Call of the Wild and White Fang. I'm not really interested in reading White Fang after reading The Call of the Wild. I know it's supposed to kind of be the opposite, where the wild dog goes into domestication, I think, but I mean, same author, so I would expect some of the same content, and that's not what I want. So then after this one, I went into the next book that was on my TBR and my nostalgia read for the year. Magician by Raymond E. Feist. In my wrap-up TBR video from last month, I showed that I have the 2-book version where it's split up into Magician Apprentice and Magician Master. I kind of like that it's split up. After reading the first one, it does feel like 2 separate stories, almost like a novel with its prequel or like a novel and its sequel. It doesn't feel like one book, but it is a direct continuation, same world, same characters, just going further and expanding more. I finished Magician Apprentice and I'm about halfway through Magician Master. These are very classic fantasy. They're from the 80s. For me, they're nostalgic because I first read them in high school. Well, I first read this one in high school, and then I read Apprentice later. And now, as I'm reading them, as a much older person, it's a lot easier, I think, to see more of the Lord of the Rings influence, which in some ways is a lot more obvious and in others is a lot more subtle. I kind of like the subtle influences where it's like Feist took an idea from Tolkien and then completely made it his own instead of so copy. But you have your classic humans, dwarves, elves, the goblin-y creatures. But whereas the first one is a lot more like a normal classic fantasy, starting with the farm boy, not really farm boy, the keep boy, the cook's adopted son, and follows him on his journey as apprentice magician. Once you get into the second one, it kind of splits into separate stories, following the different characters, and it's almost like separate books put together. I don't know, I probably shouldn't talk too much about it because I'll make a video about these dedicated to just these two books, but I really like how this one is more expanded. You see the world they start on in the first book and expand into the alien world, and it opens up into more point of view characters, so you're not just seeing from the young boy that you started with. It also spans a pretty long time period, so you see a lot of character growth. And then a book that I was not planning on reading, that I read pretty much mostly in one day, and another one that I am going to make a full video for but haven't yet, is This Is How You Lose the Time War. Actually, I'm possibly filming a video for this one today, and it might come out before this video, so that might be a lie. But I really liked this one. It was pretty short. I didn't have much to do the day I read it. That was one of the days that I was quite sick, sitting around home, and I was able to read almost the whole thing in one day. I read a few pages the day before, and it's very, very much a abstract science fiction. It is a romance. It spans a lot of time. There's a lot of vivid visual descriptions. And this is a book that you read for fun, for a different experience in your reading. There's not a lot of in-depth world building. So if you're used to hefty fantasy books with lots of world building, you don't get that here. But you get a really good look into the imaginations of the authors, and I thought it was really well done. At least I thought that after like 70 pages or so. At first I wasn't sure, but I ended up really enjoying it and would recommend it. And then October. I am only going to say 2 books because I don't know what I'm going to be able to accomplish reading-wise, and I think I want this to be a month to leave room for mood reading if I have time. I may have said this in my last TBR, but October will be the month that I skim Oathbringer for the Bridge 4 characters. Somehow this whole month of September, I never did film my Bridge 4 video for Words of Radiance. I have all the notes sitting there. I'm hoping I can film that one in the next week. I wanted to film that before starting Oathbringer so it didn't get mixed up in my mind. And I realized that I don't need to pressure myself to get a Bridge 4 video for all of the first 4 books before the 5th book comes out. That's just what I wanted to do. So if I can, I will. So I'm not rereading the whole thing, which should give me time for other stuff, but I'm at least going to skim through and look for members of Bridge 4 and where they are and what they're doing in this one. Book 5 comes out in December, which feels really soon. It's like the beginning of December. December 6th, maybe? It's early December. And the other book that I am reading starting in October is The Fury of the Gods by John Gwynne. Anyone else who has read the first 2 books or who is currently reading through the first or second ones, I would be happy to have you read along when the 3rd one comes out at the same time. I know my Discord is probably going to have some conversations going on while reading through that 3rd book. And then my plan is to vlog it as I have time. So as I read through the book, I'll take the time to stop, film little videos of my thoughts as I'm reading. When I finished The Hunger of the Gods, I wasn't sure I was ready to just dive back into that world again already because that's a lot of Vigriv. But now it's been long enough, I'm really ready and I'm excited. That one comes out October 22nd. Thank you to my patrons for hanging out and for talking about books with me. Links to my Patreon and Instagram will be in the description, and I hope you're enjoying whatever you're reading. Happy reading. Bye.